My name is Andy Gilmore, and I'm delighted to say that I've been happily married to Claire, my high school sweetheart, for 16 years now. We have our teenage daughter, April, who is 14 years old. I'm a solid guy. I'm 6 feet tall and around 200 pounds. I'm an electrician, so that muscle comes with the territory. While I wasn't the best in the classroom, I've always been a whiz at practical tasks. After finishing high school, I jumped into training as an electrician. After 4 years of dedication and hard work, I passed the test to become a journeyman electrician. By the time I hit 24, I'd already gotten my master's license. I'm a smart guy, but I've always preferred learning by doing. I was set on starting my own business, but my wife, Claire, was more interested in the stability of my job at Alpha Electrical Contractors, especially since we had a young daughter and she stayed home. I really enjoyed my job and the lifestyle it offered. We were able to pay off our house and cars, and we were enjoying the fruits of our labor. We took exciting vacations and never stressed over bills. I thought we were happy. My best friend since 3rd grade, Tom, had become a wildly successful businessman after earning a degree from Stanford and an MBA. He's got money, but he's single and often joins us for dinner, chatting about how envious he is of my family. He reminds me that while money can buy many things, it can't buy love. I always agreed with him. I loved Claire, and April was my world. We were close, and I even taught her a bit about electrical work, though I hoped for more for her future. But in August, my world collapsed.
This is your story channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please join us to stay updated with more real stories happening around you.
But in August, my world collapsed. When I got home from work, I saw Tom's car in the driveway, which wasn't unusual since he often came over for dinner. Usually, when I arrived, my daughter April would be there to greet me at the door, but this time she wasn't there. I asked Claire where April was, and she said she was at her friend Danielle's house. Both Claire and Tom had these strange expressions, like they were trying to hide something. When Claire said, "We need to talk," I knew something was up. I had just finished a hot outdoor job and really needed to take a shower, so I asked if I could take a moment to clean up. As I washed, I started to wonder what was going on. Could Claire be pregnant? We hadn't talked about having more kids, but it had been a few weeks since we'd been intimate, so the timing seemed possible. That could explain her concern, though I would have embraced the idea of another child. But then I thought, what about Tom? Maybe she shared the news with him to see how I would react. I started to worry that someone might be sick. I had no family left. My father had died in a car crash when I was 11, and my mother passed away 10 years later. Their divorce, caused by my mother's infidelity and my father's inability to cope with it, shaped much of my childhood, but I'm grateful for the lessons I've learned. I was wondering if the issue could be with Claire's parents or her sister, Liz. I even thought maybe it was Claire or Tom, but I figured I would have known sooner if that were the case. With nothing else to go on, I went downstairs to face whatever this was. When I joined them in the living room, I noticed that Claire and Tom were sitting together on the couch, while I sat alone on the love seat. Claire started by saying how much she appreciated me, but it quickly turned into a confession. She and Tom had fallen in love, and she wanted a divorce. It felt like a cinder block had hit my chest, but I was open to the possibilities. I was speechless, struggling to comprehend what she was saying. Claire continued, hoping we could handle things smoothly for April's sake, keeping her life as undisturbed as possible. When I finally found my voice, I asked if she had slept with him. She gave me a wry smile, and her answer was a knife in my back. Of course I have, Andy. I was still trying to process everything. We had been together for over 20 years, more than half our lives. I had always believed we were happy, and I was confident that we could work through any issues we had. But now, I was left with so many questions, wondering what had happened. It was Tom's kind gesture to interrupt that finally helped me find my voice again. "Andy, look!" he exclaimed. "No," I shouted, surprised at my own enthusiasm. "You're never to speak to me again, you backstabbing son of a witch." My voice was ringing with excitement. "Let me be clear, Tom. If you say another word to me, I'll be sad, and I'll miss you. Nod if you get that." He nodded, his eyes alight with surprise and anticipation. Tom was just a suit, not very strong, and he knew I could break him in half if I wanted to. Claire jumped in, her voice alive with excitement. There's no need to act like this, Tom. Let's try to keep things civil, please, Andy. I have to act this way, and I'm doing my best. I'm the one who's being taken advantage of and stomped on, so let's just be real here. I spat at her, and I'm taking custody of my little girl, not you. Andy, I understand your frustration, but I'm standing my ground on custody. We'll work out a fair visitation schedule so you can spend plenty of time with her. But for now, she's staying with us so her life can be as normal as possible. You work long hours, and I'll be at home, ready and waiting. Forget that. I'm sorry if I said something that upset you. I'm afraid you're missing the point. She's my kid, too. I've been working hard for the last 18 years to support my family, and now I get to be a part-time dad? The woman I made a home for has decided to trade up for someone with a bigger bank account. I guess that's why none of the other women ever worked out. Apparently, he had his sights set on you. She told him, "This isn't about money, Andy. The truth is, we never should have gotten married. I thought I loved you, but we were just kids. I married you because we'd been together for so long and everyone expected it. I tried to be a good wife, but as I grew older, I realized there was more out there for me. I found it with Tom. We didn't mean for this to happen, but it did. He was always around and we just clicked. To be honest, we were a little surprised that you never noticed how well we got along. It was during this time that I first saw them holding hands. Couldn't help but notice. I had faith in my wife and best friend, even if that faith was misplaced. I never imagined that two of the people who meant the most to me would do something like this. You've already done so much for me. If you decide to fight me for custody, I'm ready for you. Got it? Then I guess the gloves are off, Claire replied. I'm sorry you think it has to be this way. Could have been handled so much more easily. Whatever. I'm sorry for making your complete betrayal harder than you want it to be. You witch. I'm sorry, but you need to leave as well. I'm not going to leave the house I worked so hard to pay for just because you think I'm not good enough anymore. Mr. Moneybags would be thrilled to host you in his amazing bachelor pad. Claire said, Fine. I've already got a lot of stuff at his place anyway. That stung a little, but she took a deep breath and let it go. I'll just grab a few more things, and then we're off. For what it's worth, Andy, I'm sorry. They were already out of earshot when I muttered. It's clear that nothing I say holds any weight. I sat quietly on the couch while they packed in the bedroom for about 30 minutes. Tom left with a suitcase, and Claire followed, pausing briefly before leaving without saying a word. When April got home, I explained what happened, steering clear of any harsh words about her mother or Uncle Tom. I had complete faith in my bond with April, and I was positive she would choose to stay with me. At 14, she had a say in custody decisions, and I trusted her love for me. I hired a lawyer, ready to fight for our family, but he warned me that the laws weren't in our favor. A lamb one seemed like a good option, but then Claire and Tom got married, and the child support depended on where April chose to live. I was pretty sure that I wouldn't have to pay. But then, 3 weeks later, at the hearing, Claire kindly waived alimony since Tom was earning more and they were planning to marry. I chose not to look at her during the proceedings. The judge spent a heartwarming hour with April, who emerged in tears. I thought maybe she was feeling a bit guilty about choosing me. The judge granted the divorce, finalizing it in 120 days. Claire was kind enough to waive alimony in claims to our savings, which I kept. The custody arrangement was really generous too. April could stay in the same school and environment, which was great. I was in a state of pure astonishment, but I'm eager to witness the unfolding of this beautiful journey. April chose Claire over me, and I was thrilled for her. I had misjudged everything, believing my family truly cared about me. It felt like a reprise of my past, when I was used and discarded, but I'm eager to move forward and make new memories with April. Now, they had a better option in Tom. The judge's words about equity, child support, and visitation were a bit confusing, but I'm staying positive. I'm so grateful for the chance to grow and learn from this experience. My attorney tried to reassure me, but I couldn't focus. I wandered into the hallway, a bit hazy, and April was there, giving me a hug and whispering, "Daddy," but I couldn't respond. I felt so betrayed by Claire, Tom, and even April, but deep down, I was still hopeful for the future. I had no one left. Claire approached with a look of concern, assuring me that I'd still see April and that this was for the best. Tom wisely stayed away. I said, "I guess you won and I lost. I'll be out of here by the end of the week." Thinking I meant leaving the house, she replied, "There's no rush, Andy. Take all the time you need. We can stay in the condo as long as we need to. I'm optimistic that we can work through our differences and find common ground. You still mean a lot to me." I turned to face her, my voice now laced with anger. "I'm not going to take any of your nonsense. If we had any real connection, this wouldn't have happened. As I said, I'll be out of here by the end of the week. I'm asking you to please take your daughter and give me some space." "She's our daughter, Andy," Claire said. "She'll be seeing you next weekend." I let out a playful growl. "No, she's made her choice. She chose you. Goodbye, Claire." I took a step out the door, my heart filled with gratitude. Claire. After the hearing, Tom listed his condo, hoping it would sell quickly. Most of his things were packed, ready to move into the house Andy and I shared, once Andy left. Our main concern was to keep April's life stable since Tom's condo was in a different school district. Tom and I hadn't planned for this, but we were open to whatever might happen. We fell in love despite trying to resist. Hurting Andy wasn't the plan, but our feelings were too strong to control. Our first intimate moment happened when Andy had an overnight job, which confirmed that we were meant to be together. In the weeks that followed, we met twice more before finally telling Andy. My feelings for Tom deepened, and I was ecstatic. During those 2 weeks, it was hard to turn down Andy's advances, but I was now loyal to Tom. We knew Andy would be hurt, but we hoped he'd recover. We didn't expect how everything would unfold. Andy's communication was limited to his lawyer, which added an intriguing layer to the situation. He was supposed to pick up April at 4 p.m., but by 4:30, there was no sign of him. His phone was disconnected, and I couldn't reach his lawyer. I took April to the house, and we were all excited to see what would happen next. When we arrived, the house looked like it was just a little busy, but we were on our way to a fun adventure. Andy's things were gone, but that just added to the mystery of it all. But April's room was untouched, as if she had just left for a little while. On the counter, I found a cashier's check covering Andy's child support until April's graduation. A knock on the door caught me off guard, and I hoped it was Andy, but it was Mrs. Perrine, our neighbor. She told me that Andy hadn't been around for days. She said he'd emptied the house onto the lawn, and a Salvation Army truck had picked everything up, probably the day after our divorce hearing. When I asked if he had left any forwarding information, she asked April to step outside. I braced myself for the worst, but then I felt a sense of hope. Mrs. Perrine shared the message Andy had left for me. He said, "If you asked where he was, to tell you he'd see you in hell." Tears streamed down my face as the reality hit me. Andy was truly gone. He had already taken care of paying his child support, given away everything he couldn't take with him, disconnected his phone, and left without saying a word. I had thought he was just leaving the house, not disappearing from our lives entirely. When he said April was your daughter, I thought maybe he was just upset. After Mrs. Perrine left, April came back inside and saw my tears. I felt like I had no choice but to tell her the truth. Andy had left. She got really upset, blaming me for pushing him away by being unfaithful and breaking up our family. She started crying, and I gave her a big hug, saying sorry, even though I knew it wouldn't bring her back. We sat on the floor, crying together for what felt like hours but was only about 10 minutes. We drove back to Tom's condo in silence, and it was a beautiful moment of connection. April went back to her room, where she continued to express her emotions through tears. Tom asked what had happened, and I explained everything. I told him about Andy's generous donation, how he disconnected his phone, and even left the child support check. He even told our neighbor that he would see us in hell. I confessed my fear that Andy might do something drastic, but Tom was just as excited as I was. I leaned into Tom, and we shared a moment of pure astonishment at the incredible events that had just unfolded. Tom said, "I never would have thought he'd react like that. He's always been the one who could handle the crisis. I remember one time when we were messing around and breaking beer bottles outside that school, and the cops showed up. We all scattered, but there was no way we'd all get away. But Tom, he was different. He put himself in harm's way, making sure the rest of us could escape. When we asked him about it the next day, he said there was no other way out of it. They needed to catch someone, and he was the one to do it. Once they had their man, he figured they'd stop looking for anyone else. He said he was the most logical choice, since he was the one with the record. He gave himself up for us. It made perfect sense to him. I knew he'd be hurt by this, but I was sure he'd understand that it made sense, and we'd somehow move on. For now, we're just waiting and seeing." Andy's profession as an electrician is incredibly advantageous. It's been a huge help in finding work wherever we've gone, and it's allowed me to keep a low profile. I canceled all my credit cards, paid cash for everything, and moved 3 states away before they realized the house was empty. I found a local contractor who was kind enough to pay me in cash, even though I didn't deserve it. I didn't mind because I didn't need much money and just wanted to keep busy. The contractor asked if I was on the run, and I told him I was just trying to stay out of sight. I let him know that I wasn't on the run, just trying to avoid being found. He seemed to understand, and he even mentioned his own ex-wife, which made me smile. I slept in my car using a nearby truck stop to shower and shave. I could have stayed in a room, but I preferred to stay under the radar. They probably weren't searching for me, especially since they had the child support, but I wasn't going to take any risks. When the weather got colder, I found a room for rent, which made me feel right at home. The owner, an amiable elderly woman named Miss Ruth, was open to a more relaxed arrangement, which was really nice of her. She didn't need the money, but she was excited to have company and help fixing up her mobile home. In exchange for keeping a low profile and helping with repairs, I was welcome to stay a few nights a week. Seemed like a win-win, so I agreed. Claire. The divorce was finalized in mid-January, and about a week later, it was April's 15th birthday. She was really hoping her dad would reach out, and I was determined to make that happen. But the day passed without any contact. I was really sad when I heard her crying into her pillow that night. I went into the bedroom I now shared with Tom, a space that used to belong to Andy and me. Tom was reading, as usual. I couldn't believe that Andy had cut off contact with April, but I was hopeful that things would improve. Tom confessed that he, too, was taken aback, admitting that they had underestimated the depth of his feelings. But he reminded me that we couldn't let this overshadow our lives together. We decided to move forward and explore the possibility of helping April process her feelings through counseling. I agreed, and I realized that with Andy gone, we would need to support her in coming to terms with his absence. Andy, I had been living with Miss Ruth for nearly 3 years, going to work and coming home, day in and day out. Most nights, I stayed in with her, having no interest in going out or meeting women. It was January, and I had quietly marked my 40th birthday 2 months earlier. I was trying to move on, but sometimes I couldn't help but think about the past. My ex-wife was about to turn 40 as well, and her 3-year anniversary with Tom, whom she married 2 months after our divorce, was coming up. I had seen their wedding announcement online and gotten a little tipsy that day. I also knew my former daughter was turning 18 this month and would graduate high school in June. I had a little think about her college plans, but I quickly pushed them away. All I wanted was a drink to block out the memories of those who had betrayed me. Claire. April had been driving since she was 16, so when she turned 18 and saw the new car we had given her in the driveway, we felt good about letting her take some friends to the mall for the day. We had come to terms with the fact that we no longer expected anything from her father on her birthday, but we still held on to a glimmer of hope. But once again, the day came and went without anything showing up. Graduation day. As I sat among the 347 students in my high school class, I felt a surge of excitement for what my life could hold. My parents should still be married, sitting together to watch me walk across the stage, something we had talked about for years. Felt selfish, but I couldn't help how I felt. Mom seemed happy now, having moved on with Tom, and they clearly loved each other, probably more than she ever loved. And Dad. I felt a surge of excitement knowing that this new chapter in my life was unfolding. I scanned the crowd and spotted Mom and Tom, who waved when our eyes met. Nearby, I caught sight of Danielle's parents, who had been there for me through the divorce and beyond. They had always been so supportive, trying to help me understand the pain Dad likely felt, even though they didn't approve of his choices. I was grateful for their presence, even if they were really there for Danielle. As I scanned the crowd, I was delighted to see a number of familiar faces. One person caught my eye. Near the back, a man with long hair and glasses caught my eye. I jumped up to get a better look, but just like that he was gone. Perhaps it was just my imagination. Claire. The next 4 years went by in the blink of an eye. Each one was filled with the joy of new experiences. Despite our efforts, including visits to fertility specialists, Tom and I couldn't conceive a child. I really wanted to give Tom a child, but it just wasn't in the cards for us. But despite that, our relationship was filled with so much joy. Even as we reflected on some of the consequences of our decisions, we were grateful for the time we had together. Meanwhile, April was on the brink of graduation from UC Berkeley, ready to embark on a fulfilling teaching career. She had started dating a wonderful young man named Benjamin, and they seemed to be a great match. As often happened during significant moments in April's life, I found myself thinking about Andy. It had been 7 years since we'd heard anything from him. We even got in touch with his lawyer, but they weren't able to give us any clues about where he was. I took solace in the fact that we hadn't received any news of his passing, which made me assume he was still alive somewhere. I found myself wondering about his life and if he had found a way to move past the hurt I caused him. Andy, still living off the grid, I rented a room at a boarding house, paying cash without a lease, thanks to Miss Ruth's reference. At 44, I was in great shape. Miss Ruth had fallen ill, her family had moved her to a care facility, and her mobile home had been sold. I continued working for the same company, still paid in cash with occasional raises. While I wasn't exactly content, I had found a sense of inner peace. That changed when I walked into Denny's for lunch. I hadn't been there in a few weeks. I had become close with Gail, a vibrant woman in her early 60s. When I arrived, she directed me to a cozy booth instead of the counter. My server was a new face, a mid-30-something guy, tall, slim, blonde, and easy on the eyes. His name tag read Sheila. As we chatted throughout my meal, I could tell we shared a special connection. When her shift ended, Sheila wished me a good day, which was something she hadn't done with other customers. I took this as a sign and asked her out on a date. She smiled and agreed. After she left, I asked Gail for details. Sheila, 35, had an 8-year-old daughter named Megan. Her husband had left her for her best friend, and she'd moved here for a fresh start. Gail had set things in motion, thinking we'd be a great match. I arrived at Denny's a little early with flowers, feeling a bit nervous but also excited. Sheila appeared right on time, looking stunning in a white floral dress and pink heels. We complimented each other, and the connection was undeniable. Walking to Maggie's Steakhouse arm in arm felt as natural as could be. Seated at a cozy booth, Sheila shared that she had just started at Denny's and was thrilled about the schedule, which allowed her to be there for her 8-year-old daughter, Megan. When she asked if I had kids, I said no, distancing myself from April.